Her son sold her late husband's chair, behind her back. Dot Abbott, retired florist and widow, didn't raise her voice. Brian said it was just clutter. Jenna called it just practical. By the end of the month, they'd be out of her house, off her deed, and written out of every future they thought they owned. She'd spent a lifetime holding things together. Now, she was packing them up. And when her children came to claim her piece, they found a locked door and a forwarding address. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The late morning light slanted through the lace curtains, soft and dusty, like memory itself. Dot Abbott paused halfway down the hallway, her slippers brushing against the old pine floorboards. Something was wrong. The rhythm of the house had changed. Too still, too hollow. Her eyes landed on the empty patch of rug beside the fireplace. The rocking chair, Frank's chair, was gone. For a moment, her mind refused to believe it. Maybe Brian had moved it for cleaning, or to fix the leg that sometimes squeaked when it leaned to the right. But the indentation on the rug was cold, the faint ring of dust perfectly framing its absence. The house itself seemed to ache there. Brian? Her voice came out soft but sharp at the edges. He appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, phone in hand. Oh, hey, Mom. Yeah, about the chair. Some collector online offered $600 for it. Can you believe that? 600 for that old thing. Dot blinked. You sold it? Yeah, he said, grinning as if he'd done her a favor. It was just taking up space. I figured you'd appreciate the extra cash. From the kitchen, Jenna's voice chimed in like a bell without warmth. It was just gathering dust, Dot. And it's not like you used it. Dot's hand went instinctively to the locket around her neck. Her fingers trembled slightly as she looked at the hollow spot again. That chair was Frank's, she whispered. Brian shrugged. He's been gone 8 years. You've got to start letting go sometime. Something inside her chest tightened, a small, contained flame catching in her ribs. And you thought you had the right to sell it? He sighed theatrically, checking his phone. Mom, don't start. I'm handling things now, remember? You said you wanted less to worry about. Dot didn't remember saying anything like that. But lately, Brian's tone made her second-guess what she did or didn't say. His words always came with a confident, practiced calm that made her feel unreasonable for feeling what she felt. She didn't reply. She couldn't trust her voice not to break. The kitchen faucet dripped. Jenna hummed tunelessly as she scrolled on her tablet, the scent of reheated coffee thick in the air. Dot's house, her sanctuary of decades, felt smaller than ever. The front door opened, bringing in the crisp bite of October and the faint scent of marigolds. Georgia Price stepped inside without knocking, her scarf flapping in the wind. Dot, I brought you some mums from the stand. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing on the fireplace. Where's Frank's rocker? Dot's throat constricted. Gone. Georgia blinked once. Gone. How? Brian smirked, crossing his arms. Sold it. Online. Some collector's probably admiring it right now. Georgia turned to him with a look that could peel paint. You sold that chair? Jenna rolled her eyes. It's just furniture. No, Georgia said flatly. It wasn't. Dot felt her friend's hand on her shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. The warmth of it steadied her breathing. Outside, a gust rattled the window panes. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Then Georgia exhaled through her nose, slow and sharp. Well, she said finally, her voice lower now, colder. That was a mistake. Brian laughed under his breath. Relax. It's not like it's the end of the world. Dot stared at him, the tilt of his chin, the way he occupied her living room as though it were already his. Somewhere deep in her chest, the small flame flickered higher, hotter. No, she said quietly. not the end of the world. Georgia looked at her, reading something in her expression. Her fingers tightened on Dot's shoulder once before letting go. "Dot," she murmured, "maybe we should take a walk." Dot nodded faintly, eyes still fixed on the empty rug. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. The silence around her was cleaner than grief, sharper than anger. Brian had no idea that in that silence, something in his mother had shifted, something that wouldn't shift back. The next morning came dressed in gray. A slow drizzle traced down the kitchen window, soft as breath on glass. Dot stood at the counter with her coffee, staring at the muted reflection of her own face. The house creaked under the damp, the way old bones do when the weather turns. The empty space beside the fireplace seemed louder today. Every time she passed it, she caught herself glancing there, expecting the slow, gentle rhythm of wood against wood, Frank's soft hum as he read the paper. But all she saw was rug and dust. Georgia had stopped by early, still in her raincoat, a paper bag of muffins dangling from her wrist. "You didn't sleep," she said simply. "No," Dot answered. Georgia set the bag down, her gaze following Dot's to the bare patch by the hearth. "He shouldn't have done it." Dot didn't reply. Instead, she crossed the room, kneeling by the old oak file cabinet tucked beneath the stairs. The drawer stuck, as always, protesting with a squeal before sliding open. Folders leaned sideways like tired soldiers. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the tabs. Insurance, utilities, bank, house. The word itself looked heavier today. She pulled the manila folder free and laid it on the dining table. The paper inside smelled faintly of ink and old paper. Frank's handwriting on the envelope in neat block letters. Property deed. Dot unfolded the document carefully. There it was, near the bottom, typed in plain, merciless print. Owners, Frank Abbott and Brian Abbott, not Frank and Dorothy. Her name wasn't there. The room tilted slightly, or maybe her breath just caught. "He added Brian," she murmured. Georgia moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "When?" "Must have been when Frank got sick," Dot said softly. "He said it was just in case. For convenience." I didn't think to ask what that meant. Georgia pressed her lips together, hands on her hips. Convenience for who? Dot stared at the page again, at her late husband's familiar signature beside their son's neat scrawl. She felt no betrayal toward Frank. He'd trusted the boy, trusted love to stay simple. But love, she thought now, could rot quietly under good intentions. Her pulse slowed, steadying like a clock settling into rhythm. "It's just paper," she said. "And paper can be changed." Georgia arched a brow. "You're not thinking of letting this slide?" Dot met her eyes. The answer was there before she spoke. "No, I'm not." For the first time that morning, Georgia's mouth curved into something close to a grin. "Good. Then let's start fixing it." They worked in silence for a while, Georgia wiping the rain from the window pane, while Dot gathered what she'd need. Frank's old folder of bank statements, a marriage certificate, tax records. Her movements were calm, almost methodical, as if she'd done this 100 times before. She found a tin in the cupboard and filled it with oatmeal cookies she'd baked 2 nights ago. Warren Bell had always liked those, back when he came by the flower shop for arrangements, a man who'd rather help quietly than loudly. By the time the clock struck 11, Dot had her handbag packed with files, the cookie tin tucked neatly on top. Georgia pulled on her gloves. "You sure about this?" Dot looked around the room. The threadbare armchair, the family photos lined up like witnesses, the faint outline of where the rocker used to sit. "Quite sure," she said. The rain had eased to a mist when they stepped outside. The air smelled of wet leaves and city clay. Georgia started the car while Dot sat beside her, hands folded in her lap, the deed lying face down between them. At a red light, Georgia glanced over. You know, most folks your age would just yell, maybe cry a little, then let it go. Dot smiled faintly. I've done enough letting go for one lifetime. They turned down Main Street, passing the courthouse with its pale limestone steps. Dot watched the flag whip softly in the wind, its colors damp but defiant. Inside, she imagined Warren at his cluttered desk, sipping his lukewarm coffee, sorting through a stack of deeds that all claimed to tell the truth. She'd walk in calm and small, cookies in hand, but she'd leave knowing exactly what belonged to her. Georgia parked by the curb. Want me to come in with you? Dot shook her head. This part's mine. She stepped out into the drizzle, the tin and folder clutched close to her chest. The courthouse doors loomed ahead, old brass handles polished by decades of anxious hands. For the first time since the rocker vanished, Dot felt a strange, quiet satisfaction stirring beneath her ribs, something like purpose. She reached for the door handle, her reflection ghosted in the glass. Let's see, she whispered. What's really mine? The door creaked open, the scent of paper and rain blending in the air as she disappeared inside. By the time Dot left the clerk's office that afternoon, the drizzle had stopped, and the clouds had broken into soft, silvery ribbons. She stepped into the chill air feeling something unfamiliar. Control. Warren Bell had confirmed what she needed. Her name might not have been on the deed, but she still had leverage, technicalities Brian had never thought to read. Back home, the house greeted her with its usual hush, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a board she could play. Georgia called just as Dot was hanging up her coat. Well, how'd the county treat you? Dot smiled faintly, pulling the cookie tin from her bag. Warren still got his sweet tooth, and a good memory. Georgia's voice sharpened with interest. That's a yes? That's a we'll see, Dot said. But I think it's time I found someone who knows about selling things the right way. A pause. Then Georgia said, Lori Chen, smart as a whip. She helped my niece unload her ex's condo without the man even knowing it was on the market. I'll text you her number. That night, Dot typed the number into her old flip phone and left a voicemail in her calm, clipped tone. Ms. Chen, this is Dorothy Abbott. Georgia Price gave me your name. I'd like to discuss a property. Quietly. The next morning, she waited at the Lexington Diner, the kind of place where the booth still had chrome trim and the smell of bacon never quite left the air. Rain streaked the big front window and the radio hummed low from the kitchen. Lori Chen walked in right on time. 30-something, dark bob, sharp suit that looked out of place among the coffee mugs and pie plates. She slid into the booth across from Dot, her smile professional but kind. Georgia said you're discreet, Dot began, stirring her coffee. I am, Lori said. And you're looking to sell? Dot's eyes drifted to the rain outside. Yes, quietly. Before my son knows. He thinks the house is his. Something flickered across Lori's face. Respect? Maybe? Or understanding. I can keep it off the listings until you're ready. Pocket sale. No online photos. No public sign. Cash buyers. Only. Dot met her gaze. That's what I want. No noise. Lori nodded. I'll handle the paperwork. You'll just need to decide what stays and what goes. The waitress appeared with refills, and Dot watched the coffee swirl into her cup, black and smooth. She felt almost steady again. When they parted, Lori pressed a card into her palm. You call me before he finds a reason to look through your mail. Dot slipped it into her coat pocket like a secret weapon. That evening, Georgia's pickup rattled into the driveway, its bed half filled with empty boxes from her flower stand. She leaned out the window and called, You've got work to do, Dot. Inside, the house was dim, except for the lamp by the mantel. Dot opened one box and wrapped her wedding china in tissue paper, one plate at a time. The sound of newspaper crinkling filled the silence. Feels strange, she said quietly, like packing a life away. Georgia handed her another stack of paper. "You're not packing it away," she said. "You're packing it up." Big difference. They moved through the rooms together. The guest room where Brian and Jenna had spread their things across the dresser. The sunroom where Frank used to prune his plants. Dot found herself folding linen napkins she hadn't touched in years, tucking them into boxes labeled Keep and Donate. "Where will you put all this?" Georgia asked. "The shed behind your stand, if you don't mind," Dot said. "Until I find something smaller." Georgia gave her a look over her glasses. "Honey, you can fill that whole shed and I won't say a word." Dot smiled for the first time that day. "I might just take you up on that." The hours slid by in soft rhythm. Fold, wrap, tape, label. Every sound felt deliberate. Each object she packed lightened her chest a little more. By the time the clock chimed 9, a small mountain of boxes lined the hallway. The house looked bare, stripped down to its bones. From upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Dot froze, heart thrumming. Brian's footsteps crossed the hall, then stopped. "Mom," he called down. Dot exchanged a glance with Georgia, then forced her voice to sound calm. "Just cleaning up, dear." The steps retreated. The bedroom door clicked shut. Georgia exhaled. "You're gonna give me a heart attack." Dot set the roll of tape down, her hands steady now. "He can't see it yet," she said. "Not until it's done." She looked toward the empty space by the fireplace one last time. Where the rocker had once been, the afternoon light had faded into a soft, cool shadow. Something inside her hardened. Not cruelly, but with purpose. The morning sunlight found Dot at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of manila folders and coffee rings. She had slept barely 3 hours, but her mind was sharp. Too sharp for the calm she wore. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound as she read Warren Bell's note for the 5th time. "Your husband left a survivorship clause. It gives you authority equal to Brian's. That means you can sell." Those 6 words glowed like a match in the dark. At precisely 9 o'clock, Lori Chen called. "Mrs. Abbott, I've gone through the records. You're good to proceed, if you're sure." Dot traced the rim of her mug. "I've never been more sure." "Then come by my office this afternoon. We'll make it official." Lori's office was on the 2nd floor of a narrow brick building off Maxwell Street, the kind of place that smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon polish. Framed photos of satisfied homeowners lined the hallway, all of them smiling beside sold signs. Dot paused by one of the pictures, a couple about Brian's age, grinning like they'd won something they didn't deserve. Then she followed Lori into a small conference room. The paperwork was already laid out, corner-clipped, each signature line marked with neat yellow tabs. Lori handed her a black pen. "These are under your authority alone," she said. Warren confirmed everything. "You'll be listed as the acting seller. The buyer's ready to move fast. Cash offer. No inspection." Dot adjusted her glasses, the words on the page swimming for just a moment before settling into focus. "Cash," she repeated softly, almost testing the sound of it. "Yes," Lori said. "And when it closes, the check will be made payable to you. Only you. I've taken care of that." Dot met her eyes. "Good. I'd hate for anything to get lost." They shared a small, understanding smile. Then Dot set the pen to paper. Her signature came slow but unwavering, each stroke deliberate. With every loop of her name, she felt something old and heavy uncoil from her chest, a kind of freedom she hadn't felt since Frank was alive. When she finished, Lori gathered the pages neatly. "You did the hard part." "No," Dot said quietly. "The hard part's telling him." Lori tilted her head. "Do you want me to handle the notice?" Dot shook her head. "No, I'll do it myself. He likes to act surprised. This time, I'll give him a real reason." That afternoon, she stopped by the courthouse again. Warren Bell looked up from his desk, a cookie already halfway to his mouth. Back so soon? He said, brushing crumbs from his tie. Dot smiled. You always said paperwork is best handled in person. He chuckled. True enough. You're all set. I filed the notice of sale under your authority. You want me to copy Brian's portion of the record for your file? Yes, please. Warren slid the folder toward her, eyes narrowing slightly. You're sure you want to go through with this? Dot met his gaze, steady as stone. I'm not selling a house, Warren. I'm buying my life back. That silenced him. He nodded once, solemn, then reached for another cookie. Back home, the house was silent again, eerily so. The hallway smelled, faintly of dust and lemon cleaner, the kind Brian always used when pretending he was helping out. Dot sat at her writing desk by the window. The certified letter form waited beside a neat envelope, already addressed to Brian Abbott, resident. Her handwriting was slow and exact, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding. Notice of intent to sell. 10-day period for review. Transaction authorized under surviving spouse clause. Sale to proceed thereafter. She folded the paper and sealed it carefully, pressing the flap until the glue held tight. Then she slid it into the padded envelope, affixed the postage, and wrote his name again. Larger this time. From the porch, she watched the mail carrier pull up in the drizzle. The envelope left her hand and disappeared into the slot with a dull, final sound. Inside, she poured herself a small glass of sherry and stood by the window, watching the carrier's truck vanish down the street. The house felt different now. Less haunted, more waiting. When Georgia called that evening, Dot told her only, "It's done." Georgia didn't ask for details. She just said, "Then brace yourself. The storm's coming." Dot smiled faintly, her reflection caught in the window pane. Calm, gray-eyed, immovable. "I've weathered worse," she said. The letter arrived faster than she expected. By the next afternoon, Dot heard the heavy slam of the front door. Once, twice, like thunder warning of the storm Georgia had promised. "Mom!" Brian's voice ricocheted through the house, already sharp with fury. "What the hell is this?" Dot didn't look up right away. She stood at the counter, steeping a fresh pot of tea, her motions unhurried, each step deliberate. The soft hiss of the kettle almost drowned out the stomp of his boots on the hardwood. Almost. He burst into the kitchen, waving the crumpled certified letter like a victory flag. His face was red, jaw clenched. "You're selling the house? Our house? You've lost your damn mind." Dot reached for the teapot, steady as ever. "No, Brian, I found it." He blinked, momentarily thrown off. "You can't just—" She poured the tea into 2 cups, the fragrant steam curling between them. "Sit down." "I'm not—" "Sit," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him hesitate. He sat, still gripping the letter. Jenna appeared in the doorway a beat later, her arms crossed, nails lacquered and gleaming. "Dot, this is insane. We live here. We've put our time, our money." Dot set a cup in front of Brian and one in front of herself. "You sold my chair." Brian blinked, confused by the pivot. "What?" "You sold my chair," she repeated, voice level but threaded with steel. "Frank's chair, without asking. You told me it was time to let go." He scoffed. "That's not the same thing." Dot looked at him over the rim of her cup. "No," she said, "it isn't." The room was quiet for a long moment except for the ticking of the clock above the sink. Jenna fidgeted, eyes darting between them like a spectator unsure which fighter to bet on. Finally, Brian spoke again, lower this time. "You can't sell this house, Mom. My name's on the deed." Dot set her cup down gently. "So it is. And mine carries equal weight." Warren confirmed it. He blinked. "You went to Warren? Jesus." He rubbed his face, exhaling hard. You don't understand how any of this works. You'll ruin yourself. You'll ruin us. Dot folded her hands, her wedding band catching a sliver of light. You already did that, Brian. Jenna stepped forward, forcing a brittle smile. Dot, honey, maybe we can just... Dot didn't even glance at her. The house is closing in 10 days. The words hung there, heavy as stone. Brian's face drained of color. You what? Dot's voice stayed calm, the same tone she'd used to comfort customers at her flower shop after funerals. There's a buyer, cash offer, no contingencies, the paperwork signed. He pushed his chair back so fast it screeched against the floor. You can't do that. You can't just sell my home out from under me. It's not your home, Dot said simply. Jenna's voice rose, tight and shrill. Where are we supposed to go? Dot stood and walked to the sink, rinsing her cup as if the conversation were already over. That's not my concern. You might check the classifieds, or that online marketplace you're so fond of. Brian slammed his hand on the table. This isn't over. Dot turned to face him, eyes sharp now, her calm carrying the weight of finality. Yes, Brian, it is. The front door slammed again. Jenna trailed after him, muttering something about lawyers. The sound of their car engine rattled down the driveway and faded into the street. Dot exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering for the first time all day. The house was silent again, almost peaceful. Then the phone rang. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Mrs. Abbott. Lori Chen's voice came through, brisk but warm. Just wanted to update you. The buyer wired the full cash payment this morning. Funds are verified and locked. No backing out now. Dot's hand tightened around the receiver. You're certain? Positive. The deal's rock solid. Congratulations, Mrs. Abbott. You're officially untouchable. For the first time in years, Dot smiled wide enough for it to reach her eyes. She glanced at the kitchen table, the envelope still crumpled where Brian had left it. Thank you, Lori, she said softly. That's good news. After she hung up, she walked to the window. Outside, the oak trees along the street swayed gently in the late afternoon sun, gold leaves scattering across the lawn. The storm had passed. The air smelled new. By sunrise, Dot already knew how the day would go. She'd planned it down to the hour, her list written in neat, looping cursive across a pad by the phone. 9 a.m., storage unit. Noon, Georgia. 1 p.m., boxes. She sipped her coffee in silence, the hum of the refrigerator ticking like a metronome. Brian's truck wasn't in the driveway, thank God. He'd left early, likely to meet one of his old buddies for a late breakfast and a round of self-pity. Dot had checked the garage before she dared breathe. The coast was clear. She set down her mug and tied her scarf with brisk, purposeful fingers. The rocker's absence by the fireplace didn't sting anymore. It was simply a mark, proof of what she'd lost and what she was reclaiming. The storage unit sat on the edge of town, tucked between a tire shop and a hardware store. The manager, a red-faced man in a windbreaker, showed her the space. Unit 142. Clean, dry, and private. He handed her the key with a polite, distracted nod. Dot ran her hand over the cold metal latch. This'll do just fine. An hour later, George's old pickup rattled into the driveway. The bed was piled with folded blankets, rope, and a dolly that had seen better days. Beside her sat Nathan, the neighbor's 16-year-old grandson, bony, polite, and strong enough to lift anything Dot pointed at. He grinned shyly. You really moving, Ms. Abbott? Dot smiled back. I'm moving forward, sweetheart. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint sweetness of wood polish. Georgia grabbed a box from the hall, squinting at Dot's neat handwriting. Kitchen, keep. You sure you want to take all this? She asked, hefting it onto the dolly. Dot brushed her hands off. I've been sure for years. Just didn't have the nerve till now. Nathan started hauling boxes down the porch steps. My grandma says you're selling the house. Dot paused mid-fold, her fingers smoothing the corner of a tablecloth. She talks too much, she said with a small smile. The rhythm of packing returned. Tape tearing, wood scraping, George's voice giving orders no one minded obeying. It was almost musical, like the shop days when Dot and Frank had arranged flowers together. Quiet work with meaning tucked in the corners. By noon, the dining room was empty except for sunlight and echoes. When they reached the storage unit, Nathan helped unload while Georgia kept guard, cigarette dangling from her lips though she hadn't lit it. Feels strange, doesn't it? She said as Dot labeled another box. Feels right, Dot replied. Every time I move something out of that house, it breathes easier. Georgia laughed softly. So do you. Later that afternoon, Dot stood in Lori Chen's office again. This time, Lori had her tablet open to a slideshow of condos. Clean, bright, quiet. This one's perfect, she said, tapping the screen. 2 bedrooms, balcony facing the park. And it'll be in your name alone. No co-owners, no fine print. Dot studied the photo. Sunlight on white curtains, a small table with a single vase of daisies. I'll take it. Lori looked up, surprised. You don't need time to think? Dot smiled faintly. I've done my thinking. Now I'm doing. Back at the house, evening light stretched long across the floors. The shadows made everything look like a memory, hollow and fleeting. Dot moved through each room, opening drawers, folding linens, emptying shelves. She didn't linger. She didn't say goodbye. By 7, the kitchen counters were bare, except for the teapot and 2 cups still drying from yesterday's confrontation. She left them where they were. Some things were better left behind, like markers in a battlefield. The sound of gravel crunching outside made her freeze. Headlights swept across the windows. Brian's truck. Georgia hissed, "You said he'd be gone till 8." He was supposed to, Dot muttered. Nathan darted out the back with the last box. Dot stayed where she was, smoothing her hair, heart hammering but face composed. The door flew open. Brian stopped short in the living room, his eyes scanning the half-empty walls, the stacked boxes by the door. "What's going on?" he barked. Dot turned slowly, meeting his glare with unnerving calm. "I'm moving a few things. Just what's mine." His gaze darted around the stripped-down space. "You're gutting the place." "Not gutting," she corrected softly. "Clearing." Jenna appeared behind him, barefoot, holding her phone like a weapon. "You can't just do this, Dot. You can't just decide everything on your own." Dot walked past them both, heading for the front door. "Can I?" She stepped out onto the porch, the cool air wrapping around her like armor. Behind her, she heard Brian's voice crack. More fear than anger this time. "Mom, what are you doing?" Dot turned just enough for him to see her profile in the porch light. "What you never did, Brian. I'm taking care of what's mine." The next morning broke, sheen clean and cold, the kind of crisp Kentucky morning that turned breath into smoke. Dot stood at the window with her coffee, watching the frost fade from the porch rail. The house was quieter now, emptier. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt cleared out, like she'd finally swept the dust off her own backbone. Behind her, footsteps. Jenna's voice, thin and sugar-slicked. "Dot, we need to talk." Dot didn't turn. "Do we?" "Yes, we do," Jenna said, forcing a light laugh. "Look, I know things have been tense, but Brian and I, well, we moved in to help you. Remember? To make things easier for you?" Dot finally turned, leaning one hand on the back of a chair. "You moved in for the mortgage-free space," she said evenly. Jenna blinked. The smile faltered. "That's not fair." "It's true." Jenna's voice wobbled, trying for sympathy. "We gave up our apartment to be here. We did this for you." Dot's expression didn't change. You sold my husband's chair for $600 and called it help. The color drained from Jenna's face, but before she could respond, Brian thundered down the stairs, voice already raised. Mom, we're not doing this. I talked to a lawyer. Dot set her cup down. Did you now? He says this whole thing might not even hold up. You can't sell without both signatures. I'm on the deed. Dot smoothed her cardigan, her tone mild as a sigh. Then let him try to prove otherwise. George's voice came from the hallway, carrying a grin you could hear. Amen to that. She stepped inside, coat open, scarf trailing, carrying a clipboard and her usual hurricane energy. Morning, sunshine, she said to Dot. I brought donuts and a reminder that your son's full of hot air. Brian spun toward her. This is none of your business. Sweetheart, Georgia said, unbothered. I've been in this house since you were knee-high. It's all my business. She bit into a donut and added through a mouthful. And if you're planning to sue your mother, you better hope your lawyer works for free. Brian flushed scarlet, jaw tightening. You think this is funny? I think it's predictable, Georgia said. Before he could retort, the sound of a car door outside cut through the tension. Tires crunched on gravel. A second later, the doorbell chimed. Dot didn't move, but her pulse quickened. She knew who it was before Georgia opened the door. Lori Chen stood there, all crisp confidence and quiet control, clipboard in one hand, a stranger in a navy coat just behind her. The buyer. Afternoon, Mrs. Abbott, Lori said, stepping inside with professional calm. We're here for the final walkthrough. Brian barked out a laugh that didn't sound like laughter at all. You've got to be kidding me. Lori's polite smile didn't waver. 10-day close. We're right on schedule. Jenna whispered, Brian. But he didn't move. He just stood there, frozen as the reality sank in. Dot said nothing. She didn't have to. Lori led the buyer through the house, explaining things with practiced ease, the refinished floors, the sturdy foundation, the ample, natural light. Georgia followed behind, munching another donut, clearly enjoying the show. Dot stayed by the kitchen doorway, hands folded, while the small group moved upstairs. From the landing came the sound of measuring tape snapping open, footsteps crossing Brian's man cave. Brian's voice cracked. They're measuring my room. George's laughter rolled up from the foyer. Correction, sugar. They're measuring your former room. Dot didn't laugh. She didn't gloat. She just watched the light shift across the floorboards, felt the air moving freely through the half-empty house. A few minutes later, Lori came back down, clipboard tucked under her arm. Everything looks great, she said. We're set for final signatures tomorrow. Brian turned to his mother, eyes wide with disbelief. You're really doing this? Dot met his gaze, calm as the grave. I already did. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he turned away, pacing, hands buried in his hair. Jenna whispered something, but he didn't answer her. Dot moved past them both, pausing at the base of the stairs. You might start packing, she said quietly. The movers will be here by the weekend. Lori's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. Funds just cleared, Mrs. Abbott. Brian stopped pacing. Funds? Full payment, Lori said, pocketing her phone. The house is officially sold. The signing day dawned pale and cold, a sky the color of pewter. Dot Abbott buttoned her gray wool coat, smoothed the lapel, and checked her reflection in the mirror one last time. Her hair was neatly pinned, her lipstick deliberate. She looked, she thought, like a woman who'd come to finish something. Lori Chen's office smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, the same as before. The blinds were open this time, sunlight glinting off the stack of paperwork arranged neatly on the polished conference table. A vase of chrysanthemums sat beside them, bright yellow, like the ones Frank used to bring home from her shop. Good morning, Mrs. Abbott. Lori's voice was warm but efficient. Congratulations. It's all ready. Dot smiled. Let's make it official, shall we? Lori handed her a pen, sleek, silver, heavier than it looked. Every signature will release the funds. Once it's done, the buyer gets possession, and the proceeds will be wired to your name only. Dot read each page slowly, deliberately. Her eyes moved over the printed lines, the legalese, the empty signature boxes waiting for her mark. Seller, Dorothy May Abbott. For the first time in months, her name stood alone, unshared, unclaimed, unshadowed. She signed the first line, then the next. Each motion was precise, a ritual. Lori double-checked each page, sliding them aside one by one. That's the last of them, she said. Congratulations, Mrs. Abbott, it's done. Dot exhaled, the sound quiet but deep. Is it? Lori smiled and opened a folder, sliding out a certified check with a pale blue watermark. The sum printed on it made Dot's fingers still for a heartbeat. Pay to the order of Dorothy M. Abbott. Her husband's handwriting used to grace every check that mattered in their life. Now the bank's bold typeface stared back, anonymous, unfeeling, but entirely hers. She slipped the check into her purse, closing the clasp with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Lori reached across the table, her tone gentler now. You did something most people wouldn't have the courage for. Dot gave a faint, knowing smile. Courage is overrated. Sometimes it's just stubbornness in a nice coat. They shared a quiet laugh before parting. Outside, the cold air hit her like clarity. Georgia was waiting by the curb in her battered pickup, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. Well? She asked. Dot held up her purse, the corner of the check just visible. Georgia let out a low whistle. Lord, I hope he's sitting down when he figures it out. Dot slid into the passenger seat, the leather creaking beneath her. He'll text before noon. You watch. Georgia grinned. You want me to block his number for you? I can do that myself, Dot said, but there was amusement in her voice. They drove through downtown Lexington, past courthouse steps and rows of red brick storefronts. The world outside moved on, oblivious. Students on bikes, traffic lights changing, someone walking a golden retriever in a red bandana. To everyone else, it was just another Thursday. To Dot Abbott, it was a resurrection. Her phone buzzed in her lap. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Brian. You're really doing this? A second message followed, the words unraveling in real time. After everything Dad left you? After everything I've done? You'd throw me out like garbage? Dot turned the screen face down and slipped it into her coat pocket. Drive on, she said quietly. The pickup wound along the outer road, past the old gas station and the sign for bluegrass storage. Georgia pulled into the gravel lot, the engine rumbling low. Unit 142 waited, its padlock gleaming in the late light. Nathan had stacked everything neatly during the last trip. Boxes labeled kitchen, linens, Frank's tools. The faint scent of cedar and old fabric filled the air when Dot lifted the door. Georgia leaned on the tailgate. You really want to sit here a minute? Dot nodded. Just a minute. She stepped inside, tracing the corner of one box, the texture of a life packed tight. The stillness settled around her like a quilt. No arguments, no slamming doors, no voices clawing for control. She sat on a crate marked books, folded her hands in her lap, and breathed in. The scent of cardboard, dust, and quiet wrapped around her lungs like oxygen after a long dive. Georgia stayed at the threshold, watching her friend's shoulders lower, her spine straighten. You did it, Dot, she said softly. You really did it. Dot looked up at her, eyes calm but sharp. Not yet, she murmured. But I will. Outside, a crow landed on the power line, its caw echoing across the lot like punctuation. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and damp wool. Dot Abbott sat on a wooden bench, her purse folded neatly in her lap, the faint tick of the hallway clock marking time she no longer owed to anyone. Warren Bell emerged from the clerk's office, a thin folder tucked under his arm and a smile hidden behind his mustache. "Well," he said, lowering his voice as he approached, "you can stop fretting. The county reviewed the complaint this morning." Dot tilted her head. "And?" "And your son's petition was denied," Warren said, eyes twinkling. "Flat out. You held controlling interest at the time of sale and the paperwork's bulletproof. The boy doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." Dot exhaled through her nose, the faintest smile tugging at her mouth. "I told him as much." Warren chuckled. "Oh, I bet you did." He patted the folder. "You're clean, Mrs. Abbott. Case closed." She thanked him, offered him the last oatmeal cookie from her tin, and stepped back out into the light. The January air bit at her cheeks, sharp but invigorating. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the weight of waiting, just the calm that follows a storm. By late afternoon, Dot was sitting at her favorite corner table in Magnolia Cafe on South Broadway, her coat draped over the chair beside her. The place smelled of lemon cleaner and vanilla, the hum of conversation a low, steady comfort. She had a slice of lemon pie cooling beside her coffee and a library book open to the middle, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. She liked how the girl in the story kept going, no matter what. Outside, traffic passed in steady waves, people rushing to wherever they still had to be. Dot wasn't rushing anymore. She took another forkful of pie, savoring the tart and the sweet together, and let herself smile. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Georgia lit the screen. "You seen Facebook yet?" "Jenna's at it again." Dot sighed, sliding on her reading glasses and opening the link. There it was. A sprawling, emotional post from Jenna Abbott, time-stamped 5 minutes earlier. "Some people will rob you with a smile. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. Some folks forget who took care of them when they couldn't even walk straight." Attached was a blurry photo of the empty living room, the caption reading, "Our home. Stolen." Dot blinked once, then chuckled softly. A second later, another message popped up from Georgia. This time, a screenshot of the same post, with the comment, "I'm framing this." Dot typed back, "Don't waste the ink." Georgia replied with a single laughing emoji. The bell over the cafe door jingled. Lori Chen appeared, brisk and bright as always, a folder under one arm. She spotted Dot and crossed the room. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. Dot gestured to the chair. "You bring good news or more paper?" "Both," Lori said, sliding into the seat. "The check cleared. Buyer's funds are settled, titles transferred, and your new condo keys are ready whenever you are." Dot nodded. "So it's done." "Completely done," Lori confirmed. "No surprises left." Dot stirred her coffee, thoughtful. "It's strange," she murmured. "How quiet freedom sounds." Lori smiled softly. "You earned it." Dot didn't answer. Her gaze had drifted toward the window, to the people walking by, their bags, their chatter, the steady motion of a world that didn't know or care about Brian Abbott's temper or Dot Abbott's steady hand. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table. "Can you make sure this gets delivered?" Lori frowned slightly. "To who?" "The Bluegrass Hospice Foundation," Dot said. "In Frank's name, $600. Lori blinked. "The amount from the chair?" Dot nodded. Seemed fitting. It started all this. It might as well end something too. Lori took the envelope carefully, almost reverently. "He'd be proud, you know." Dot smiled faintly. "I think he'd be amused." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the hum of the diner soft around them. Dot finished her coffee, brushed a few crumbs from her plate, and closed her book. Outside, The sky had shifted to gold at the edges, the kind of light Frank used to call forgiving. Dot stepped onto the sidewalk, the faintest breeze lifting her hair. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Brian. She didn't bother to open it. She slid the phone deep into her coat pocket, where the hum of it faded beneath her heartbeat. She started walking toward the bus stop, the world open and steady before her. The wind came sharp off the highway, carrying the smell of rain and diesel. The row of storage units gleamed dull silver under the late afternoon sky. Dot parked George's truck by the office door and climbed out slowly, her coat snapping in the gust. She wasn't here to linger, just to check her things, make sure everything was in order before the movers came for the final trip to her condo. It should have been a quiet errand. But quiet was a luxury Brian Abbott didn't grant easily. She saw his truck before she heard him, parked crooked across two spaces, engine still running, the driver's door wide open. He stood beside Unit 142, pounding on the metal door with his fist. The sound echoed like gunfire. "Mom!" he shouted, his voice slicing through the wind. "We're not done talking." Dot stopped halfway across the gravel lot. Pulse didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake. She'd expected this. Knew he wouldn't let things end in silence. When she reached him, she spoke as calmly as if she were greeting a customer in her flower shop. "Brian, you shouldn't be here." He spun, his face red, his jaw tight. "You think you can just shut me out? You think this is over because some lawyer stamped your name on a piece of paper?" Dot's gaze drifted past him to the padlock on the door. New brass, unscuffed, catching what little light remained. "The locks have changed," she said evenly, "just like me." Brian blinked, disbelief twisting into anger. "You can't lock me out of my own family, of my life." "This was never your life," Dot said. "It was borrowed time." He stepped closer, his voice rising, the kind of volume meant to scare her back into the smaller version of herself he preferred. "You think you can walk away from me? From your own son?" Dot's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward. There's a difference." Brian slammed his hand against the unit door, the sound metallic and furious. "You always were cold," he spat. "No wonder Dad—" "Stop," Dot said quietly, her tone flat and final. The single word cut sharper than a shout. For a moment, even the wind seemed to pause. From behind the office window, the facility manager, a stocky man in a red cap, stepped outside, phone in hand. "Everything all right here, ma'am?" Brian turned on him. "Stay out of this." The manager didn't flinch. "You touch that door again, sir, and I'm calling the police. Private property." Brian's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked at Dot, eyes wild, desperate. "You're really gonna do this to me?" Dot took one step back, her voice low, steady. "I didn't do anything to you, Brian. I just stopped letting you do everything through me." He rattled the door again, more out of frustration than strength. The metal clanged, hollow and useless. Dot turned away, her footsteps soft on the gravel. "Don't walk away from me," he yelled. "You can't just—" "Mom!" But she could, and she did. The manager raised his phone to his ear, muttering something into it as Dot reached the truck. Georgia was behind the wheel, window rolled down, a pair of sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Need me to hit him with the truck?" she called. Dot's mouth twitched, just enough to be called a smile. "Not today." Georgia smirked, then started a slow clap, the sound sharp and sure. "That's my girl." Dot opened the passenger door, climbing in without looking back. Through the windshield, she could still see Brian, standing in front of the locked unit, shouting at nothing but wind and steel. The padlock glinted once more before the truck pulled out, gravel crunching beneath its tires. The sky over Lexington was beginning to darken, streaked with silver clouds. Dot rested her hand on the key hanging from her necklace, Frank's ring still looped beside it, and let out a breath that carried months of weight. "He'll stop," Georgia said softly. Dot looked out at the road ahead. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I'll just stop hearing him." The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, time-stamped 2:43 a.m., the hour when guilt likes to dress itself up as regret. Dot saw the subject line before she even opened it. "We need to talk, Mom." She didn't click right away. Instead, she sipped her coffee, the quiet hum of her new condo filling the space where old noise used to live. The walls were clean, pale blue, the air faintly sweet from the lavender candle Georgia had insisted she light every morning. Finally, she opened the message. It began the way all of Brian's apologies began, with a paragraph about how much stress he was under, how unfair things had been, how she'd misunderstood him. "You blindsided me, Mom. I was just trying to protect what Dad built. I know I messed up, but I was under pressure. You didn't have to go nuclear." He went on for 6 paragraphs. Guilt, flattery, nostalgia, all polished to sound heartfelt. Near the end, he wrote, "We can fix this if you just give me a chance. Maybe we can work something out with the condo. I know you didn't mean to hurt me." Dot read every word once, then twice. Her pulse never changed. The old ache of motherhood stirred faintly, like a bruise that still remembered where it came from, but it faded before it could swell. She clicked forward, typed in Lori Chen's email, and wrote a new subject line, "For laughs." Then she hit send. By the following afternoon, a new message pinged in, this one from Jenna. Shorter, but slicker. Dot. "I know things are awkward right now, but we just need a little help with rent this month. Things have been really tight. You're still family, right?" Dot let out a low hum, neither yes nor no. She didn't bother replying. Instead, she tapped block contact, then did the same for Brian's address. The silence that followed felt like music. Georgia called not long after, her voice cheerful and unbothered. "Did you read the son's sob story?" "Read it, yes," Dot said. "Believed it, no." "Good," Georgia said. "You're finally graduating from the School of Soft Hearts." Dot smiled. "Took me 71 years to earn that diploma." That weekend, she wandered down Jefferson Street, taking her time with the window displays. Her breath made little clouds in the cold air. Most stores were new, trendy cafes, art studios, but one had an old wooden sign that caught her eye. Crandall's Antiques. Inside, the air smelled like lemon oil and dust. The owner, a thin man in suspenders, nodded politely as she stepped through the door. "Take your time," he said. She did. Rows of furniture lined the narrow aisles, old clocks, polished sideboards, porcelain lamps. Then, near the back, she saw it. A rocking chair. Oak, solid, worn smooth along the armrests, where someone's hands had once rested day after day. It wasn't Frank's. It didn't hum with the same memories, but it felt right. Dot ran her palm along the curve of the arm, the grain warm beneath her touch. "How much for the chair?" she asked. The man looked up from his ledger. "120. If you can haul it, I'll make it an even 100. "I can haul it," Dot said. She paid in cash. Georgia arrived an hour later with her pickup, eyebrows raised when she saw what Dot had bought. "Couldn't resist, huh?" Dot smiled faintly. "Guess not." Together, they maneuvered the chair into the condo's small living room. Afternoon light spilled across the floor as they set it near the window that overlooked the park. Georgia stepped back, hands on her hips. "Looks like it was meant to be there." Dot eased herself into it, testing the balance. The wood creaked softly, gentle, steady, patient. "It'll do," she said. Georgia grinned. That's the understatement of the year. They spent the next hour unpacking small boxes, books, framed photos, a few dishes. When they finished, Georgia stood by the door. "You good here?" Dot looked around, The condo felt quiet but alive, each corner hers in a way the old house hadn't been for years. "I'm good," she said. Georgia smiled. "Then I'll let you enjoy the silence." When the door clicked shut, Dot sat back in the chair and began to rock. The motion was slow, measured, grounding. Outside, the sun slipped lower, catching the edge of the window frame in gold. For a long moment she just listened, to the creak of the chair, the hum of the city below, her own breathing settling into peace. The courthouse in downtown Lexington always smelled faintly of coffee, floor wax, and nerves. Dot Abbott arrived 10 minutes early, wearing her charcoal coat and the quiet confidence of a woman who'd already survived worse battles. Lori Chen met her at the metal detector, tablet tucked under her arm, hair pulled into a sleek knot. "You ready for this?" she asked. Dot smoothed her gloves. "I was ready the day he sent the summons." Warren Bell appeared behind them, carrying a manila folder so thick it looked like it could stop traffic. "Morning, ladies," he said cheerfully. "Got everything here. Dates, deed copies, the sale record, even a notarized copy of the funds transfer. He can argue emotion all he wants. The law's not in the mood for it." Dot smiled faintly. "Good to hear." They entered the small courtroom, one of the municipal chambers reserved for small claims. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The benches were nearly empty except for a woman crocheting in the back row and a young clerk typing quietly at a laptop. Brian was already seated at the plaintiff's table, hair slicked back, wearing a too-new blazer that didn't quite fit. Jenna sat beside him, tight-lipped, scrolling her phone like she was texting a lifeline. When Dot walked in, Brian looked up sharply, anger and disbelief flickering across his face. "You actually showed," he muttered. Dot took her seat across from him, unbothered. "You invited me?" The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a stack of case files taller than her water glass. She didn't look like someone easily moved by theatrics. "Case number 22 SC 418, the clerk announced. "Abbott versus Abbott." Brian stood, smoothing his tie, voice quivering between indignation and self-pity. "Your Honor, my mother sold our family home without my consent. I've been displaced, humiliated, and financially strained. She abandoned her obligation to family." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Obligation?" "Yes," Brian said, gaining steam. "We moved in to care for her after my father passed. I handled bills, maintenance, her daily needs, and this is how she repays me? Selling the home out from under us?" Dot waited for the judge's nod before standing. "Your Honor, my husband's will left me controlling interest. My son was added to the deed years ago for convenience, not ownership. I initiated the sale legally, through verified channels." Lori slid a folder across the table to the clerk. "All supporting documents are included: county filings, bank transfers, certified correspondence. It's all there." The judge flipped through the papers, her expression unmoving. "Mr. Abbott, did you read the deed before filing your claim?" Brian hesitated. "Well, no, but—" The judge looked up, unimpressed. "Then this court thanks you for wasting its time." Jenna leaned forward, whispering urgently, but Brian waved her off. "Wait. No. She's manipulating the system. You can't just— She's my mother." Warren chuckled under his breath. Lori gave him a warning glance. Dot didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched as the judge's pen scratched a single note across the docket. "Case dismissed," the judge said, "with prejudice. Meaning, Mr. Abbott, you don't get to refile. Your mother acted within her rights." Brian's mouth fell open. "That's it?" "That's it," the judge replied. 15 minutes. I've heard enough. Next case." The gavel dropped once, sharp and final. Jenna muttered something about injustice as Brian slumped back in his chair, face flushed. Dot gathered her papers, slipped them neatly into her bag, and stood. She looked at the judge. "Thank you for your time, Your Honor." The judge offered the faintest hint of a smile. "Not many people leave this courtroom smiling, Mrs. Abbott." "Congratulations." Dot nodded once. "Thank you." She turned and walked toward the exit, heels tapping softly against the tile. Behind her, Brian started to stand, maybe to protest, maybe to beg. But she didn't slow, didn't turn around. Outside, the winter sun poured through the glass doors, bright and unapologetic. Lori followed close behind, Warren just behind her. "Well," Lori said, tucking her tablet away, "that went about as cleanly as it could." Dot adjusted her scarf. "It wasn't a fight. It was paperwork." Warren laughed. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about it was easy," Dot said, stepping into the light. "But it was necessary." They walked toward Georgia's car waiting at the curb. Georgia leaned on the hood, sunglasses on, grin wide. 15 minutes? You're slippin', Dot. I figured you'd be done in 10. Dot laughed softly. "I didn't want to embarrass him too much." Georgia winked. "You already did, honey." As they pulled away from the courthouse, Dot glanced back once through the rear window. Brian stood on the steps, shoulders hunched, phone pressed to his ear. He looked smaller than she remembered. She turned her gaze forward. The sun broke through the clouds, slicing the sky in clean, bright streaks. The law office was quiet, sunlit through tall windows that made the polished oak table gleam. Dot Abbott sat upright in the leather chair, hands folded over her handbag. The attorney, Mr. Raines, a neat man with round glasses and a voice that hummed like a cello, adjusted his papers with precision. "All right, Mrs. Abbott," he said, looking over the rim of his spectacles. "You said you'd like to make some changes to your will?" Dot nodded, her tone even. "Not changes," she said. "Corrections." He gave a faint, knowing smile. "Understood." The sound of the fountain pen scratching across the paper filled the room as he read through her notes, murmuring them aloud. Removal of Brian Abbott and Jenna Abbott from all bequests. No distribution of assets, property, or personal effects. Confirmation that all funds from the house sale remain in your sole accounts. He paused. "You're certain about this?" Dot met his eyes, her own calm and unwavering. "I'm done leaving things to people who take them." The attorney nodded slowly, then continued. "You've also added a charitable allocation." "Yes," Dot said. "The Lexington Community Garden Foundation. They're expanding the plots behind the library this spring." He raised his brows, intrigued. "Any reason for that choice?" "My husband loved growing things," Dot said softly. "Flowers, tomatoes, patience. He used to say the only real proof of care is what you leave blooming after you're gone." Mr. Raines smiled faintly. "That's a beautiful thought." "It's a fact," she said. When the documents were ready, he turned the pages toward her. Dot signed each line with a steady hand, her script looping elegantly. Her name looked stronger this time. Not a relic, but a declaration. When the last signature dried, she set the pen down and exhaled, slow and certain. "That's that," she said. Mr. Raines stood. "It's an honor to witness a woman who knows exactly what she wants." Dot smiled faintly. It's new territory. Outside, the afternoon sun carried the crisp edge of February. Georgia was waiting by the curb, her floral scarf flapping in the breeze. She squinted at the envelope in Dot's hand. "That it?" Dot nodded. Every I dotted, every bridge burned. Georgia grinned. "You always did like tidy endings." They drove in comfortable silence until Dot gestured toward the next street. "Pull in here." It was a small stretch of land between the post office and an old stone church. Rows of raised beds, turned soil, wooden stakes waiting for seedlings. The Lexington Community Garden, freshly painted on a weathered sign. Georgia killed the engine. You're giving them some of your sale money, huh? Not some, Dot said. Enough to make it grow. Georgia sniffed, eyes glistening behind her sunglasses. You really don't do anything halfway. Neither did Frank. A man in overalls waved from the far end of the garden. Dot waved back. She didn't know him, but that wasn't the point. She was here to leave something that didn't ask for anything in return. That evening, the sun melted low over her new balcony. Dot sat in her second-hand rocker, a glass of sweet tea in hand. The air was cool, tinged with honeysuckle from somewhere down the street. Below her, children's laughter floated up from the park. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing at all. Georgia sat beside her in a lawn chair, fanning herself with a folded grocery ad. I still can't believe you took your son out of the will. That's ice cold. Dot sipped her tea. It's not ice. It's clarity. Still, Georgia said, shaking her head with mock solemnity. If there's a heaven, Frank's up there grinning like a fox. Dot smiled. Then I did right. For a while they sat in easy silence. The chair creaked gently beneath her, rhythmic and alive. The sound was comforting. A heartbeat made of wood and memory. Georgia glanced over. You really happy, Dot? Dot looked out across the fading light. I am, she said. Because I didn't lose a home, I reclaimed one. Georgia nodded, quiet for once. 2 weeks later, a small envelope arrived in Dot's mailbox. No sender listed, only a neat return stamp from the Lexington Community Garden. Inside was a photograph, freshly turned soil, sunlight catching a new wooden plaque at the garden's entrance. The inscription was simple, carved clean into the grain. In honor of Frank and Dorothy Abbott May, what they planted keep growing. Dot traced the edges of the photo with her fingertips. Her throat tightened, not with sorrow, but with something purer, brighter. She set the photo on the windowsill, beside the vase of daisies she'd picked that morning. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of earth and rain through the open door. She leaned back in her rocker, the floorboards creaking beneath her in steady time, and whispered, We did it, Frank. We really did. Spring came late to Lexington that year, soft and hesitant, as if the season was holding its breath. Dot noticed it first in the way the air changed. The sharp bite of winter gave way to something gentler, carrying hints of thawed soil and lilac. She was waiting for the bus on Main Street, her canvas tote resting beside her feet. Inside were a few groceries and a paperback she'd borrowed from the library. She didn't own a car anymore, and she didn't miss it. There was a peace in letting the city carry her, one stop at a time. When the bus rattled past the old part of town, her gaze drifted out the window. That's when she saw it. A narrow rental duplex with chipped blue siding, curtains half drawn, a sagging porch swing missing one chain, and in the window, nothing. No furniture, no light, just bare walls and the echo of a space that still didn't feel like home. Jenna's car sat crooked in the driveway. Brian's truck, dented and dull now, was parked beside it. For a moment she thought she saw a shadow move behind the blinds. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was just her memory filling the gap. The bus rolled forward, and the house slipped from view. Dot let out a slow breath and murmured to herself, So that's where the wind carried them. The driver glanced up in the mirror, but she didn't explain. Some stories didn't need telling. That evening, she had company. Georgia Price was on her balcony again, shoes kicked off, feet up on the railing like she owned the place. She handed Dot a mason jar of sweet tea and gestured toward the sunset bleeding orange over the rooftops. You know, Georgia said, I drove past that little rental on Campbell Avenue. He was out front, trying to fix a gutter with a broom handle. She smirked. Bet he misses that chair now. Dot gave a quiet chuckle, rocking gently. The chair or the house? Both, Georgia said. You can't pawn off a family heirloom without karma coming back round to slap you with an eviction notice. Dot didn't answer right away. The rhythm of the rocker filled the pause between them. "He'll figure things out eventually," she said softly. "Or he won't. Either way, it's not my weight to carry anymore." Georgia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You finally sound free." "I am," Dot said simply. Frank would have liked this view. Georgia smiled. He'd like the peace in it, that's for sure. They sat together as the light faded, the world going amber, then blue. Somewhere below, a group of kids played tag on the sidewalk, their laughter spilling into the evening air. It sounded like forgiveness, if forgiveness had a sound. A few days later, Dot found a small white envelope tucked under her condo door. The handwriting was neat, rounded, Lori Chen's. Inside was a card printed with watercolor irises and the note in blue ink. "Dear Mrs. Abbott, some closings are routine. Others remind me why I love what I do. Yours was one of my favorites." Lori Dot smiled, reading it twice. She placed the card on the shelf beside the photograph of the community garden plaque. Then she poured herself a glass of iced tea, pulled the rocker closer to the window, and let herself settle into the rhythm she'd waited a lifetime to earn. The room was filled with small things that mattered. A vase of daisies, a folded quilt. Georgia had stitched herself, the faint scent of lavender from the candle on the table. She closed her eyes and listened to the creak of the wood beneath her, slow and steady, a sound that no one could take from her again. As the sun dipped low, the world outside glowed gold through the glass. The hum of the city softened into a quiet lullaby. Dot rocked, and the movement felt like time itself. Back and forth, past and present, loss and peace, all blending together until nothing hurt anymore. The house she'd sold was just an address now. The son she'd let go was just another lesson. What she had left was hers alone: space, air, stillness. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the kitchen table in gold. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and the good kind of quiet, the kind earned, not stumbled into. Dot Abbott poured herself a cup of coffee, humming under her breath, and sat down to sort the day's mail. Bills, a seed catalog, and one envelope without a return address. The handwriting made her pause. Brian's. She turned it over once, thumb brushing the flap. The paper was creased, smudged near the corner, as if it had been written in haste or with shaking hands. Dot set it aside, finished half her coffee, then opened it with a butter knife. The letter inside was 3 pages long, written in the same impatient scrawl that had once filled permission slips and birthday cards. But this wasn't nostalgia. It was a transaction disguised as sentiment. "Mom, I know we've both said things we regret. I've been trying to get back on my feet. The new place isn't much. I've had to sell some tools. Jenna's hours got cut. We just need a little help. A small loan to get us through the next few months. You could wire it straight to me. I'll pay you back. You know I would." There was no, "I'm sorry," no mention of the chair, no acknowledgement of the house, or the years of quiet disrespect that had chipped at her kindness one splinter at a time. Dot folded the letter once, neatly, and placed it beside her coffee cup. Outside, the light had shifted, brighter now, almost sharp. The steam from her cup curled upward, catching the sun, ghost-like. She sat there for a long moment, thinking of all the ways she used to react. The old versions of herself that might have reasoned, softened, reached for a pen. But those versions, no longer lived here. She stood, crossed the room, and opened the drawer beside the fridge, the one labeled shred pile. The hum of the small paper shredder came alive when she flipped the switch. She fed the letter through, page by page. The sound was steady, final. When it was done, she emptied the tiny curls of paper into the bin and washed her hands. The air smelled faintly of ozone and roasted coffee. Her condo was bright by mid-morning. A soft breeze came through the balcony door, carrying the scent of fresh soil. Dot moved to the window and adjusted the small row of potted violets along the sill. She pinched a few dead leaves from one plant and smiled as a new bud peeked through. "You made it," she murmured. The violet stood upright, defiant, its color deepening in the light. Dot watered each pot slowly, careful not to flood them. "Just enough," she said. "Always just enough." She glanced at the living room. Her new rocking chair waited near the window, sunlight catching the grain of its curved arms. The wood glowed honey-warm, every inch of it alive. Dot sank into it, setting her coffee on the small side table. The chair groaned once, low and comforting, like an old friend stretching its bones. She began to rock, her rhythm matching the faint hum of the city outside. The world looked different from this seat. Not smaller, but clearer. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. George's voice came through the line, bright and smiling. "Morning, sunshine. Guess where I am?" Dot's mouth curved. "If it's trouble, I'll pretend not to know you." "Not trouble," Georgia said. "The community garden. They just put up that plaque of yours. It looks beautiful, Dot. Real beautiful." Dot looked toward the photo of the plaque on her shelf, her heart catching for a moment in her chest. "Frank would have liked that," she said softly. "He'd like what you've done," Georgia replied. "You turned a whole mess into something that grows." Dot laughed quietly. "That's what I do, Georgia. I prune." "Guess you finally learned when to cut the dead branches." "Exactly." The line went quiet for a moment, save for the faint sound of birds through Georgia's receiver. "Enjoy your piece, Dot," Georgia said finally. "You earned it." "I bought it," Dot corrected gently, "and I don't plan on returning it." They hung up with the kind of easy silence that doesn't need words. The afternoon stretched wide and still. Dot refilled her glass with sweet tea, the ice clinking softly, and leaned back in her rocker. The wood creaked in steady rhythm, each movement syncing with her heartbeat. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves. Inside, everything was in its place, small, tidy, alive. She looked at the sunlight sliding across the floorboards, at the gentle sway of the violets by the window, and felt something close to joy, quiet and certain. Then she smiled, the line forming almost of its own, a chord, soft as breath and sharp as truth. He sold the chair, I sold the house, and I kept my seat.